The afternoon sun was warm and kind, pouring through the kitchen window of the small, tidy house. It lit up the dust dancing in the air and made the old linoleum floor gleam. He was just a son right now, sitting at the familiar table with its little scratches and coffee cup rings. His mother moved between the stove and the counter, the way she always had, her motions steady and sure. "More coffee, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice soft. He pushed his mug toward her with a smile. It was his first real visit home in over a year. The world outside, with its missions and weight and noise, felt like a distant dream. Here, there was only the smell of fresh coffee and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. He watched her. She looked a little tired, he thought. A few more lines around her eyes than he remembered. But her smile was the same. She asked him gentle questions about his work, the safe, general ones he could answer. He kept his replies light, talking about the food and the weather, steering clear of anything that would bring a shadow to her eyes. He wanted this bubble of peace to last dot, but he saw it. A flicker. He was trained to notice the tiny details, the things that didn't fit. When he mentioned he'd be around for a few days, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. When a truck rumbled by outside a little too loudly, her shoulders tensed, just for a second. "Everything okay here, Mom?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "The house? Everything's good?" She waved a hand, turning back to the sink. "Oh, you know. Same as always. Mrs. Miller's cat keeps getting into my garden. The faucet in the bathroom drips." She paused, and the silence stretched a beat too long. "And that old garage out back, the one your dad rented out. I've been having a little trouble with the fellow leasing it. Nothing for you to worry about on your visit." He nodded slowly, sipping his coffee. He knew that tone. It was her "I'm handling it" tone, the one she used when things were definitely not handled. But he didn't push. He was a guest in this peaceful world, and he didn't want to be the one to break it. Later, he carried his old green duffel bag up to his childhood room. It was mostly the same. The shelves were a little emptier, some of his things boxed up, but the bed was made with his old quilt. He set his bag down by the dresser, the quiet of the house settling around him. This was the quiet he missed. The deep, true quiet of a safe place. He was pulling out a few T-shirts when he heard it. The sound didn't belong. It was the growl of an engine, poorly tuned, pulling into the gravel driveway, not with a roll, but with a sharp, angry crunch of stones. Then the heavy slam of a car door. His body changed before his mind could catch up. The easy slouch was gone. He wasn't just a son anymore. He was on alert. He moved to the window, not with a rush, but with a smooth, silent step. He didn't push the curtain aside. He stood to the edge and looked down. A big man, with a thick neck and a faded T-shirt stretched over a broad belly, was marching toward the front door. His face was set in a hard scowl. This wasn't a friendly visit. The man's fists were half clenched at his sides. He walked like he owned the path beneath his feet. The doorbell didn't ring. Instead, there was a heavy, pounding knock. Bam, bam. He heard his mother's footsteps, the soft pad of her slippers moving to the door. He heard the click of the lock, the creak of the hinge. "Oh," he heard his mother say, her voice trying for polite, but landing on nervous. "Hello. We need to talk, Eleanor," the man's voice boomed, too loud for the small foyer. It was a voice used to getting its way. "Now isn't really a good time. My son is—" "I don't care about your son," the man, Derek, cut her off. The sound of his name clicked into place for the man upstairs. This was the tenant. "I care about you trying to squeeze me for money you don't deserve." The conversation downstairs turned into a low rumble of words he couldn't make out. But the tone was clear. It was sharp. It was threatening. The peaceful bubble had been popped. He stood perfectly still at the top of the stairs, not breathing, just listening. Every muscle in his body was a coiled spring, ready, but his mind was ice cold. Asterisk assess. Wait, you are not in the room. You do not have the picture. Asterisk, he was a shadow, gathering information. And the world stopped. There was a sharp, loud crack. It wasn't the sound of a hand hitting wood. It was a wetter, heavier sound. It was the sound of a face being struck. It was followed by a small, pained gasp and the clatter of something a vase. A picture frame hitting the floor. In that instant, the ice in his mind met the fire in his blood. The man downstairs had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. He had laid hands on his mother. The mission was now terrifyingly simple. But the years of training, the brutal discipline, spoke louder than the roar in his ears. He took one deep, silent breath. He looked at his own hands, empty for now. And he started moving down the stairs, not as a whirlwind, but as a storm walking. The sound of that slap seemed to hang in the air of the small house, a dirty mark on the quiet afternoon. Upstairs, time slowed down. For the sun, the world shrank to the space between the top of the stairs and the front door. The cozy feeling of home was gone, ripped away and replaced by a cold, clear focus. He didn't run. Running was for panic. His movement was smooth and silent, each foot placed carefully on the old wooden steps. They didn't creak. He had learned to move without sound in places where a single noise could mean the end. He stopped halfway down, with the stairs turned. From here, he could see his mother was half turned away, one hand pressed to the side of her face. Her shoulders were hunched, not in crying, but in shock. The skin around her fingers was already turning an angry red. A small table by the door was knocked crooked. A little porcelain figurine of a bird lay shattered on the floor. The big man stood over her, his chest puffed out. He was still talking, his voice a low, mean growl. "That's what you get," he was saying, his finger jabbing the air near her face. "You think you can talk to me like that? In my town? You little—" The man upstairs saw it all. He saw his mother's fear, the violent pride of the man, the broken pieces on the floor. A hot, red wave wanted to take over. It screamed at him to fly down the rest of the stairs and break the man in half. But another part, a part forged in years of the hardest training, was in control. That part was like a machine, clicking through facts. Asterisk threat. One male, large, agitated. Weapon, none visible. Hostage, one civilian. Stunned but mobile. Asterisk environment. Confined, cluttered, one exit behind threat. Asterisk, the civilian was his mom. The thought made the cold focus even sharper. He took one more breath, filling his lungs slowly. The anger was still there, a furnace in his gut, but he put it in a box. He would use its heat, but not its chaos. He finished walking down the stairs. His feet made a soft sound on the wood. The big man, Derek, heard it and spun around. His face was flushed with anger and a sick kind of power. He saw a man in simple clothes, not a uniform. He saw a son, not a soldier. "Well, look who it is," Derek sneered, his confidence swelling again. He squared his shoulders, blocking the path to the mother. "You must be the son. Come to help Mommy?" The son said nothing. He didn't even look at Derek. His eyes went straight past him, as if he were just a piece of furniture in the way. He walked, his steps steady and calm, right toward the man. Derek's smile faltered for a second. Confused by being ignored. With a smooth motion, the son stepped around him. Not a dodge, just a simple step, like walking around a lamppost. He went to his mother. He gently reached up and took her hand, pulling it away from her face. The mark was clear, now a blazing handprint. Her eyes were wide, swimming with tears of pain and humiliation. When she saw him, a different fear flashed in them, fear for him. "Are you okay?" he asked her. His voice was low, quieter than Derek's yelling, but it seemed to fill the space. It was flat, calm. It didn't match the violence in the air at all. She just nodded. A tiny movement, her lips pressed together. Only then did he turn. He finally looked at Derek. It wasn't a look of rage. It was empty. Like someone looking at a problem that needed to be solved. "You need to leave," he said. The words were simple. A statement of fact. Now, Derek blinked. He had expected shouting. He had expected a scared kid to try and be tough. He hadn't expected this quiet, unsettling calm. It threw him off balance, and that made him angrier. Or what? Derek laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He puffed out his chest, taking a step closer. "You gonna make me tough guy? You think you're something special?" The son didn't answer. He just watched him, his body still relaxed. Derek took another step, now well inside the other man's personal space. He wanted to see him flinch. He wanted that cold calm to crack. "I'm talking to you," he yelled, and he shoved him. He put the palm of his meaty hand against the son's shoulder and pushed. Hard. Nothing happened. It was like shoving a stone statue. The son's body didn't rock back. His feet didn't slide on the floor. He absorbed the push without moving an inch. His eyes didn't widen with surprise or anger. They just flicked down to the hand on his shoulder, then back up to Derek's face. It was a look of pure, cool assessment. The room went very quiet. Derek's angry confidence vanished, replaced by a flicker of confusion. He pulled his hand back, as if the shoulder had been hot. The son spoke again, his voice still that same quiet tone. It was almost polite. "That," he said, "was your one mistake." For a second, there was only the sound of the old clock ticking in the hallway. The big man, Derek, just stared. His brain was trying to catch up. The shove should have worked. It always worked. People got scared, they stumbled, they showed they were weak. This man hadn't even moved. The confusion in Derek's eyes hardened back into anger. This quiet man in front of him was making him look foolish, and that was worse than anything. A red haze dropped over his vision. He wasn't thinking about rent or property or anything anymore. This was about pride. This was about who was the bigger dog in this small house. With a grunt that was more animal than word, Derek swung. It was a big, looping right fist, the kind of punch thrown in bar parking lots. It had all his weight and all his fury behind it. It was meant to knock this calm man straight through the wall. It never landed. The sun didn't block it. He didn't duck. He simply moved just a small, sharp turn of his body. The huge fist hissed through the air, missing him by an inch. In the same motion, the sun stepped forward, inside the arc of the swinging arm. He was now chest to chest with Derek, but it wasn't an embrace. It was an invasion. Derek had a moment to smell the clean soap on the man's shirt, to see the utterly calm look in his eyes from just inches away. Then he felt it. It wasn't a punch. It was a brutal, driving slam. The sun brought his forearm up in a short, vicious arc directly under Derek's ribcage, into the soft spot right below the breastbone. It was a move designed not to bruise, but to paralyze. The air exploded from Derek's lungs in a painful, choking whoosh. All the strength left his body. His eyes bulged, his mouth gaped like a fish, but no sound came out. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He was just a bag of pain, doubling over. He never felt the next move. As he folded forward, a leg hooked behind his knees and swept them clean out from under him. 1 second he was falling, the next the hard wooden floor of the foyer rushed up to meet him. The impact knocked the last bit of wind from his body with a heavy thud. He lay there, gasping, drowning on dry land. Before the pain in his back could even register, before he could try to scramble away, it was over. A knee pressed into his back, not with crushing weight, but with perfect, controlling pressure. One of his arms was wrenched up behind him, held in a grip that felt like iron bands. A single small adjustment of that grip sent a lightning bolt of pure agony from his wrist to his shoulder. He froze. A whimper escaped his lips. The sun leaned down. His voice was close to Derek's ear. It was still that same, quiet, calm tone. It was the most terrifying sound Derek had ever heard. "Listen to me," the voice said, each word clear and separate. "You struck my mother. You just assaulted a member of the military on leave. I have the legal right to use fatal force to stop you. Do you understand what that means?" Derek tried to nod, a jerky movement against the floor. He finally managed a ragged gasp of air. "Yes," he croaked. "Good," the voice continued, cold and steady. "Here is what will happen. You will not move until I tell you to. You will pay every penny of the back rent you owe. It will be in her hand by noon tomorrow. You will never come to this house again. You will never speak to her again. You will look the other way if you see her in town. Do you understand?" "Yes," Derek whispered, the fight completely gone, replaced by a raw primal fear. Finally, the son said, his voice dropping even lower, "You are going to get up. You are going to walk to your car. And you are going to drive straight to the police station. You will tell the officer at the desk exactly what you did here today. You will tell them you slapped an elderly woman in her own home. You will wait for them to process you. If you do not do this, I will find you, and we will have a different conversation. Do you understand this?" Tears of pain and shame welled in Derek's eyes. "I understand." The pressure on his arm and back vanished. The son stood up in one smooth motion, stepping away. He didn't stand over Derek, gloating. He just stood there, waiting, his hands now loose at his sides. Derek rolled onto his side, coughing, clutching his sore wrist. He pushed himself up to his hands and knees, and slowly, painfully, to his feet. He couldn't look at the mother. He couldn't look at the son. He stared at the broken pieces of the figurine on the floor. His whole body hurt, but worse than the physical pain was the shock. In less than 10 seconds, his whole world, the world where he was strong and people were afraid, had been turned upside down and shattered. He shuffled to the door, a broken version of the man who had marched in. He fumbled with the handle, pulled it open, and stumbled out into the afternoon sun without a single look back. The door swung shut softly behind him. Out in the sudden quiet of the house, the sun finally turned. His mother was still standing by the wall, her hand now at her throat, watching him. Her eyes were wide, but the fear in them had changed. It wasn't fear of Derek anymore. It was something else, something more complicated, as she looked at the stranger who was her son. The quiet after the door closed was different. It wasn't the peaceful quiet from before. This quiet was heavy, filled with the echo of violence and the smell of fierce sweat. The son stood very still for a moment, his eyes on the closed door. He was listening. He heard the car door outside open and slam shut. He heard the engine cough to life, the tires crunching gravel as it pulled away, not with a screech, but slowly, almost carefully. Only then did he let out a long, slow breath. The ice in his veins began to thaw, and he could feel his own heart beating, steady but strong. He turned around. His mother was still leaning against the wall by the shattered figurine. The red mark on her face stood out like a brand. She was looking at him, but her eyes weren't seeing the little boy she'd raised. They were seeing someone else. There was no relief in her face yet. There was just shock and a deep, worried sadness. He walked over to her, his steps soft on the floor. He didn't reach for her right away. He knelt down instead and started carefully picking up the broken pieces of the little porcelain bird, laying the fragments in his palm. "I'm sorry about your bird, Mom," he said, his voice rough. It was the first normal sound he'd made since coming down the stairs. It was like those words broke a spell. Her face crumpled for a second, and a single tear traced a line down her cheek, avoiding the wounded skin. She knelt down with him, her knees popping softly. "It's just a thing," she whispered, but her voice shook. She started helping him, their hands moving together in the small pile of china. When the pieces were gathered, he stood and offered her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her up gently. He led her not back to the noisy kitchen, but into the living room, to her big, soft armchair. He guided her to sit down. "Stay right here," he said, his tone gentle now, the command gone from it. He went to the kitchen. He could feel her eyes on his back. He ran cold water over a clean dish towel, wringing it out. He came back and knelt in front of her chair. Gently, oh so gently, he pressed the cool cloth to the side of her face. She flinched at first, then sighed as the cold touched the hot, painful skin. "I'm so sorry you had to see that," he said, looking at the floor. He couldn't meet her eyes. The shame was hotter now than the anger had been. He had brought that world, his other world, into her living room. He had turned her safe place into a battlefield. She was quiet for a long time. She just sat there, letting him hold the cloth to her face. The clock in the hall ticked. A dog barked somewhere far away. "He was so big," she said finally, her voice thin. "For a year, with the rent, the threats. He was just so big." She paused, then put her own hand over his, the one holding the cloth. "But you weren't even angry, were you?" He looked up then. Her eyes were searching his. He shook his head slowly. "No, Mom, I wasn't angry. Not when it was happening." It was the truth. In that moment, there had been no anger. There had been a problem and a solution. She nodded, as if she understood something very important. "I saw it," she said softly. "He was a storm, all noise and rage, but you were like stone. You were like deep water." She squeezed his hand. He felt that. He didn't just feel you hit him. He felt how different you were. It scared him more than any yelling ever could. Her words started to lift the weight from his shoulders. She wasn't looking at him with fear anymore. She was looking at him with a heartbreaking kind of pride, mixed with grief for what he must have learned to become that way. "He'll go to the police?" she asked. "Yes," he said. It wasn't a guess. He had seen the man's spirit break on the floor. The man would do exactly as he was told. And then what? She asked, the practical mother coming back. "And then we wait," he said. He got up and sat on the footstool near her chair. "We wait for the police to come here to get our side. We tell them the truth. All of it. You show them your face. I tell them what I did. It was self-defense." He swung first. She watched him, this son of hers who knew the rules of things she never wanted to know. "Will you get in trouble? With your job?" He gave her a small, tired smile. "No, Mom, I won't get in trouble. My job is to protect people. Today, I was protecting my mom." They sat together in the quiet living room as the afternoon light began to turn golden. The horrible tension was seeping away, replaced by a tired kind of calm. He kept the cool cloth on her face until the heat left her skin. Later, they heard the car. Not the rattling truck, but a smooth, official sedan. It pulled into the driveway. 2 uniformed officers got out. The son looked at his mother. He stood up and offered her his hand again. "Ready?" he asked. She took his hand and stood, squaring her shoulders. The fear was gone from her eyes. She nodded. Together, they walked to the front door to meet the police. The broken pieces of the past were on the counter, and a new, harder understanding was between them, but they were side by side. The two police officers were careful. One was older, with a kind, tired face. The other was younger, his hand resting lightly near his belt. They stood on the front porch, and the older one gave a small, polite nod when the mother opened the door. "Ma'am," he said, "we had a gentleman come into the station a little while ago. He made some statements about an incident here." "A Derek?" He checked his notebook. "Yes," the mother said, her voice clear and steady. She stepped back. "Please, come in." The officers stepped into the foyer, their eyes taking in the quiet house, the small table still slightly crooked. The younger officer's eyes flicked to the son, who stood calmly a few feet behind his mother. The son didn't look like a threat. He looked like a man visiting home. But the officer noticed the way he stood, balanced and still. The older officer did most of the talking. The gentleman was quite specific, and he had some minor injuries he said occurred here. "We need to get your account of what happened." The mother told it. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She explained about the rent, about the bullying, about the loud knock. "He slapped me," she said, and she turned her head to show them the faint pink mark that still remained. It was proof enough. Right here. For asking for what was owed. The older officer's lips tightened. He looked at the mark, then at the broken pieces of the figurine on the kitchen counter where they'd been placed. "And then what happened, ma'am?" She glanced at her son. He gave her a small, almost invisible nod. "My son was upstairs," she said. "He came down. The man, Derek, became aggressive. He shoved my son, and then he took a swing at him. My son defended himself." She kept it simple, just the facts. The older officer turned to the son. "Is that accurate, sir?" "Yes, officer," the son said. His voice was respectful, neutral. He initiated physical contact. I neutralized the threat and restrained him until he was no longer a danger. I then instructed him to leave and to report himself to you. The way he said it, neutralized the threat, made the younger officer look at him more closely. It wasn't the kind of language most people used. "May I ask what you do for a living, sir?" the younger officer asked. "I'm in the Navy," the son said. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth. The older officer seemed to understand. He just nodded slowly, making a note. They asked a few more questions. The son described the exact sequence, the shove, the wild punch, his response. He was precise, like he was reading from a report. The officers listened. It was clear the story matched exactly what a bruised and shaken Derek had confessed to at the station. The evidence was all there. The victim's statement, the matching confession, the minor defensive injuries on the son's knuckles, the lack of any serious harm. The older officer closed his notebook. "Ma'am," he said to the mother, his voice softer now, "we have enough to charge him with assault, based on his confession and your statement, and given your son's justified response. I don't foresee any charges coming your way. This looks like a clear case of self-defense and defense of others." The air in the house seemed to lighten. The mother's shoulders, which had been held so tight, finally relaxed. "Thank you, officer." As the officers turned to leave, the older one paused at the door. He looked at the son. "You kept a cool head. It could have gone a lot worse for everyone. You did the right thing. It wasn't just professional approval. It was the recognition of one professional to another. Then they were gone, and the house was theirs again. The next morning, just before noon, an envelope slid through the mail slot in the front door. It landed on the floor with a soft thump. The son picked it up. It was thick. He handed it to his mother. She opened it and pulled out a stack of cash in a single typed line on a piece of paper. Asterisk, paid in full. There was no signature. She stared at the money, then out the window toward the old garage. "I don't think I'll be having trouble renting that space again," she said, and there was the faintest hint of a smile in her voice. The rest of the son's leave was quiet. They didn't talk much about what happened. They didn't need to. But things were different. The mother looked at her son sometimes, not with worry, but with a new understanding. She saw the discipline in the way he made his coffee, the calm in his eyes when he read a book in her chair. She saw the strength he kept locked down tight. Like a powerful engine at idle dot on his last evening, they sat on the back porch as the sun set. The sky was orange and purple. "You know," she said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "what you did, it wasn't just for me. That man, he'll think twice now. About everything. About how he treats people." She looked at him. "You gave the whole town a little bit of peace, I think, without even meaning to." He didn't say anything. He just reached over and took her hand. Her hand was small and wrinkled in his, but it was strong. He left the next morning. The goodbye was the same as always, a long hug at the door, a promise to call, her waving from the porch until his rental car turned the corner. But as she went back inside, the house didn't feel empty. It felt safe. The quiet was the good kind again. Out on the highway, the son drove toward the base, toward his other life. He thought about the bully's face, not in the moment of anger, but in the moment on the floor when the fight left him forever. The instant karma hadn't been the pain. It had been the lesson. It had been the shock of meeting someone who could not be bullied, who carried a quiet authority that came from a world of real consequences. He had gone home a son, and he had, for a few minutes, been a warrior in his mother's living room. And then he had become just her son again. That, he realized, was the real victory. He had been able to come back, and he had left her in a peace he helped make.